Welcome to the channel. Today I made for you a brief retelling of the movie Scoop. And I will tell you about an American journalism student who is in London, learns an important story, and has an affair with an aristocrat as the events unfold. I look forward to your likes and comments. Enjoy the movie. From the first frames we see the farewell in the church with the famous journalist Joe Strombell. The priest says that nothing stopped this man in pursuit of sensationalism. He went to dangerous places and often risked himself. In the evening, his colleagues confirmed this, telling each other stories about Joe's captivity in Afghanistan and other shocking experiences of the sensation-seeking journalist. Meanwhile, Strombell himself sails on a creepy ship and tries to bribe Death, but the latter is completely unresponsive. The frustrated journalist meets Jen, who was a secretary to the son of Lord Lyman. The heroine suspected that he was the tarot deck murderer and was about to go to his lawyer when she was poisoned. Joe realizes how stunning this news is, but he can no longer write. We meet Sandra Pransky, an American student who came to London to study journalism. The heroine tries to interview the famous director Michael Thompson. Meanwhile, excited by the story of a new acquaintance, Joe wanders around the ship in search of a way out. Sandra goes up to the movie director's room and drinks whiskey with him while talking about her family. Later, the annoyed heroine reveals that she had an affair with Thompson, but never got an interview from him. In the evening, Sandra, along with her friend and her younger brother, go to a show while Joe prepares for his adventure. The man jumps off the boat and swims in the opposite direction to return to the world of the living. On the stage, the magician Chodini appears in front of the characters. Sandra decides to become an assistant in one of his experiments. On the stage, the heroes have a fun conversation and the girl goes to the magic box. Unexpectedly, Joe appears inside and says that he is looking for a journalist who can help him solve the Lyman case. The frightened heroine agrees to this strange proposal, wanting to build her career. Suddenly the ghost disappears and Chodini finishes his trick. After a while, Sandra returns to the magician again and tells about the strangeness that happened to her in his dematerializer. The man says that his real name is Sydney and allows the journalist to visit the box again. However, this time Joe does not appear, and the magician sends the upset Sandra away, advising her not to tell anyone about it. Unexpectedly, Joe does materialize and says that he has only a minute, so the girl must quickly write everything down. The man tells her that Peter Lyman is dangerous and the main thing is not to scare him away. When the ghost disappears, Sandra asks the magician to help her in this investigation, but Sydney is stubborn, saying that he is useless. However, the journalist still convinces the hero, and together they wait for Lyman near the business center. Seeing a young man, Sandra decides to follow him. However, in the store suddenly it turns out that it was not Peter. On the street, Sydney tries to convince the girl to stop investigating. At home, Sandra has unexpected luck, because her friend's father has a card to the club that Lyman goes to. After a while, Sydney and the girl go to the club. The heroes notice Peter in the pool, and Sandra decides to unobtrusively get acquainted with the young man. Sydney suggests that she pretend to drown. And quite expectedly, Lyman comes to the heroine's aid. The man wants to know the girl's name, and Sandra calls herself Jade Spence. Fascinated by the girl's beauty, Lyman invites her to a Sunday party, and Sandra happily accepts, saying she will bring her father along. Cindy is surprised by the news that he should call himself Spence, and tells Sandra that they should think things through clearly so as not to reveal their real names and goals. On Sunday, Lyman is genuinely excited about the arrival of his new acquaintance. Peter gives Sandra and her father a tour of the house, and the heroes desperately try to find any clues or strange objects. While the girl communicates with the suspect, Cindy decides to show the cream of London society her card tricks. Peter tells Sandra about his fate predetermined by his parents, and the girl neatly starts a conversation about tarot. However, Lyman says he is more interested in science. The man talks a little about his dead secretary, but abruptly changes the subject and leads Sandra into the garden. Meanwhile, Sydney decides to take an adventure and examines things in the bedroom of the house. Talking with the girl, Lyman tries to kiss her, but Sandra embarrassingly pulls away. After the party, the heroine begins to doubt that Peter is capable of bad deeds, and gets angry when Sydney shows the stolen letter. As time passes, Peter is running very late for a poker game, and the morning papers carry news of a new attack by a man with tarot. Sandra decides to subdue her feelings and continue the investigation. The girl goes with Lyman to his house and suspiciously studies every little thing that can advance the case. Meanwhile, Joe appears at Sidney's performance and informs him of the numbers 16, 21, and 12. Taking advantage of Peter's absence, Sandra tries to study the bedroom and the man's personal belongings. In the album, she finds a picture of a brunette with a short haircut, which is the type of girl who has been attacked. Growing up behind Sandra's back, Peter says it's his mother. The next day, Sidney tells her accomplice about the code for the safe, and the girl remembers that she saw a door with a code lock in the room with musical instruments. The heroine receives an invitation from Peter to the dance. Sidney is again dabbling in card tricks when Sandra takes him to a quiet corner. The girl says that she will detain Peter, and the man in the meantime must open the code lock. Just before the door, Sidney desperately tries to remember the code. The hero does get into the room with tools, but a servant passing by locks him inside. Alarmed that her accomplice is missing, Sandra goes downstairs and frees Sidney. The heroes try to find clues, but hear footsteps on the stairs. It was Peter looking for his girlfriend. Sandra and Sidney manage to get out, after which Lyman offers the girl to stay at his place for the night. When the man falls asleep, the heroine goes to explore the basement. In the room, she finds a deck of tarot cards, and the awakened Peter begins to suspect something. The next day, Sandra informs the magician of her find, but he says that there is too little evidence of this kind. At the next meeting, Peter gives his beloved an expensive bracelet, which leads Sandra into confusion. Joe appears in the room of the heroine and asks her not to give in to the feeling of falling in love, but to continue the investigation. Sandra has dinner with Sidney and discusses the appearance of the ghost and life in London. Suddenly, the girl notices Peter walking on the other side of the street, who said that he would leave the city. Secretly, the heroes sneak through the streets of the city following Lyman, who looks around a little nervously. However, at one of the forks, Sandra and her father lose sight of the suspect and go the wrong way. The girl really wants to believe that Peter is a good man and Joe is just wrong. Suddenly, a screaming woman appears near them. She reports that a brunette woman has been strangled in a house very close by. The next day, after reading about it in the newspaper, Sidney suggests they go to the police. The heroes head to the newspaper first, but Mr. Malcolm tells them that no newspaper will agree to publish Sandra's investigation. The journalist explains to the frustrated sleuths that the article would be libelous, as there is too little evidence. Sandra says she got her information from Joe. However, even this does not convince Malcolm, and the man explains that he knew the deceased personally, and the latter would hardly miss such a story, much less pass it on to a student from America. In addition, the man reports that the tarot deck killer has been caught today, and all the newspapers are preparing articles about it. However, it is far from Peter Lyman, but Henry Banks, a laborer with paranoid schizophrenia. Sandra breathes a sigh of relief. However, the girl is worried, because she lied so much to Peter, and how to confess to him, reveal the truth, and keep a warm relationship. Sidney advises to continue to call herself Miss Spence, and marry a rich man. During a private meeting, Peter admits that he did not go anywhere, but secretly solved the affairs of his father's firm, so as not to attract the attention of the press. After gathering her courage, Sandra confesses to the lie. Peter asks who informed the girl about him, and the heroine gives Joe's name. Sandra says she'll understand if Peter doesn't want to talk to her, but the man just laughs and says that the girl has lifted his spirits for the day. The couple reconciles, and Lyman tells her that he bought a tarot deck for Sandra, since she mentioned that she's into it. The happy heroine tells everything to Cindy, but the man doesn't believe Peter. The magician says with fervor that he is a liar and has found a way to blame it on someone else. He pulls out a stolen letter and explains that it was addressed to Betty, the same girl who was then massacred. Sidney suggests that Lyman only committed one attack, blaming it on a serial killer. Sandra, however, stands her ground. Joe appears in front of Sidney in the dressing room, and the character says he doesn't even want to see him. However, the ghost says that this is his last visit, and advises to check the deck for all the cards in it. Sydney takes up her own investigation and questions the residents of the house where Betty died. One of the women says that the girl was always blonde, but not so long ago changed her image. In addition, the neighbor reports that the girl often visited a rich suitor, Peter Yarge. The man calls Sandra and tells her his new assumptions, but the girl says that the case has long been closed, and there is no need to investigate anything. The heroine does not want to hear anything bad about her lover, and meanwhile Peter in the next room overhears their conversation. Sydney is not going to give up. He breaks into Lyman's house by tricking the maid into looking for Sandra's non-existent sweater. Sneaking into the music room, the magician finds a small key instead of cards. Upon leaving the room, he is confronted by the maid. After Sydney leaves, the woman reports the incident to Peter. The magician arrives at Betty's apartment and unlocks it with the key he found. Peter together with Sandra are floating on a boat. Suddenly the man stops and talks about the irony of life. When they first met, he saved the heroine from the water, but now she must drown. Lyman admits that he straightened up with Betty because she began to blackmail him. The hero throws Sandra off the boat and informs the police about the accident. Meanwhile, Sydney rushes to Lyman's house at full speed. After the police arrive, Peter tells them a sad story. She is interrupted by the unexpected appearance of Sandra. The girl admits that she pretended to drown in the pool, but in fact she was the captain of the swimming team. After a while, Malcolm happily agrees to print the heroine's article. Sandra asks to split the authorship between her, Joe, and the late Sydney. On the ship of death, a man tells them that he is not used to London driving on the left side of the road, and instead of saving Sandra, he himself had an accident and died. Sydney decides to amuse his companions and shows them card tricks. This is the end of the movie. Thank you all for watching this video to the end. Give this video a like. Write in the comments what you think about this movie, and see you in new videos.